how you really know is if you're just not passionate about working at an organization, and you really just like have a disdain for the system, and you really want to have like autonomy over what you're trying to do. I think that may be the path. There are people that really are guided by structure and need structure. And if you're one of those people, this is probably not the field for you, because there is no structure. Unfortunately, you have to design that structure and create those walls for yourself and build the foundation. And that's difficult because there's no roadmap. And I think that is often can be discouraging for a lot of people. So you have to really have that tunnel vision. So if you don't have the vision to see something from 0 to 1, or can't think bigger picture, then it's probably not for you.
Hi, my guest today is Myles Gage, the co-founder of Rapunzl Investments, a mobile application that allows individuals to simulate stock portfolios for utilizing real-time market data. Myles has been an advocate for encouraging young people to invest in the stock market, given his exposure to learning about it in elementary school, where he won stock trading competitions and even got to hold Warren Buffett's wallet once. Welcome to the show, Myles.
Thank you for having me, Steve. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So I got to say, Myles, holding Warren Buffett's wallet, there has got to be a great story there. Tell me about it and how it came about.
Yeah, so that's a really cool story. So in 2008, when Barack Obama was running for office in his first term, an investment firm in Chicago, Ariel Investments, was hosting a fundraiser to raise money for his campaign.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO of Ariel, John Rogers, has a pretty good relationship with Warren Buffett. So to basically raise money for the campaign, there was a dinner with Warren Buffett in which people paid money to have dinner with Warren and get to talk to him, and exchange the proceeds from the dinner went to this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And I was invited to this dinner to meet Warren Buffett. And user or listeners are probably wondering, well, what's the tie-in there? So Ariel Investments or John Rogers specifically developed a school on the south side of Chicago called Ariel Community Academy. They had a finance-based curriculum, and I attended that school with my older brother, and we started learning about the basics of finance, economics, and investing in first grade. And each of us started independently investing and managing our own stock portfolios when we were 12. And each sixth grade class at Ariel is given $20,000 of real money to manage. So we started really excelling in the curriculum early on. And both of us entered this competition hosted by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, the Money Smart Kid competition. So that provided a really good light on Ariel, in the sense that if you can teach students and young people these concepts early on, they can grasp them. And my brother and I grasped those concepts. So it was a great reflection on the company. So anytime Ariel would have events like this, we would always get the invite. And so we got the invite to come meet Warren Buffett, which was just pretty cool.
Yeah. And how did you get to hold his wallet?
Well, we were taking a picture, and his wife said, you should let Myles hold your wallet. And it's like, cool, this is really cool. So I'm like, all right, there's going to be a bunch of cash in here. There wasn't a lot of cash. The wallet was thick, but I think he had a lot of cards. But nonetheless, I felt that some of his investing genius or his investing knowledge was passed over to me once I was able to hold that.
Kind of sunk in through osmosis through the skin, right?
Exactly. It was just transferred.
So how heavy was it? Did
it? It was dense.
Mm-hmm.
It had a nice weight to it.
Well, I think it's great that you had that opportunity there. I think that a lot of people talking now about how you just don't teach this stuff in school.
Right.
Home ec, when I was growing up, was for the girls and shop was for the boys, and home ec was about sewing and cooking, but it's home economics. And maybe that needs to be more just learning personal finance and how to make a budget and how to live on your wages and things like that. And basic investing, because people need to plan for the future for financial independence and financial freedom and ultimately retirement. So I think it's fantastic that you had that opportunity and obviously took hold of it and did something with that knowledge and information, which is great.
Right. Thank you. Absolutely. And I believe that was really the genesis of the school.
Mhm,
John and former Secretary of Education Arnie Duncan felt that in addition to math, science, English, students need to be learning about finance as well, because regardless of what field you go into, you're going to get a paycheck. And
mhm,
if you never learn how to manage your money or how to allocate your resources, then you fall into these habits of money mismanagement, and
mhm,
that becomes a perpetuating cycle that often carries on to future generations.
mhm,
So they wanted to break that, and not to say that everyone from this school was going to become an investment banker, but at the very least, they should at least know what they should be doing with their money as it
mhm,
pertains to savings, as it
mhm,
pertains to investing, and in adopting a passive investing strategy. Those were concepts that were definitely reinforced throughout the years.
mm, absolutely. And so it's great that you're doing that, and we're going to talk about that. The topic is this episode is launching a business after graduation. And I know that a lot of listeners who either had children that are in college or going to graduate or have just graduated, it seems kind of counterintuitive. Here you are, you've just graduated college. You probably have a lot of student debt you're worried about paying. And start a business, launch a business that's pretty risky. I mean, you look at most businesses fail in the first 3 years. And in fact, business coach John Paul Mendoza wrote a book saying, most businesses fail in the first 15 minutes. It just takes them 3 years to find out. So it's a risky proposition starting any business. So when does it make sense to take that path as opposed to just getting a job to pay the bills and the student loans?
It's definitely going to depend from each person.
Hmm.
And I think the overall idea is the fact that you have to be privy and acknowledge what your responsibilities are
Hmm.
and what your priorities are.
Hmm.
So if you do have monthly expenses and monthly, these reoccurring costs, you may not be able to take that leap um, and be full time right away.
Hmm.
Not to say that you can't be working on that idea, but I think if you have this idea in your head that you ultimately want to go the entrepreneurial route, you should probably, work your job for some time, but you should be actively saving and come up with a plan with how you're going to exit and how you're going to support yourself in the event that you aren't taking income from
Hmm.
this entrepreneurial endeavor. I think that's the key thing. I think with planning, you can really do a lot of things. So as you mentioned, most businesses fail within the first 15 minutes in the first 3 years. I don't think people plan and do exhaustive research and think about every different case of scenario.
Hmm. So we're really not talking about a definite fork in the road. It's not binary. You
Right.
don't make the decision, do I get a job or do I start a business?
Hmm.
You do it like I think a lot of millennials have, and probably the generation that comes behind them. It's called a side hustle. I mean, you have your regular job, but in your spare time, you're putting together this business, and so that your regular job is able to pay the bills while you're putting together and doing the research and um, deciding what you want to do. And then hopefully, if that business takes off, you're able to quit your day job, as it were, and then move into this business full time, right?
Precisely. And I think just to the point about like understanding where your priorities are, it's like it may not make the most sense for you if you have $200,000 in student debt.
Hmm.
to try to get a concept off the ground if you have to make these monthly payments. It's like, how are you
Right.
going to do that? Or if you're paying rent somewhere, like you're just not going to be able to do that. And I think with those stresses, you're not even going to be able to focus on creating the best product or the best service or the best enterprise, because you have this looming stress over you, because it's like, you have these expenses.
Hmm.
And to your point about balance and side hustles, I think that by planning and thinking about it in a strategic way, you can do both. So it's like, as you are working this 9 to 5 and managing your time wisely, when you're out of work, you're doing all the research, you're putting together whatever white paper you need to do to show you're a resident expert on your respective field,
Hmm.
and coming up with pitch decks and talking to people. You can do that while working.
Hmm.
So I think that's something that I've seen in my generation, is that people are really excited or really eager to just jump straight into something, but not necessarily thinking about what actually needs to go into that.
Hmm. Now, is this path for anybody, or are there people that that really feel that what's called the entrepreneurial itch, that they want to start a business, they have that sort of entrepreneur within them? Is this something for everybody, or how do you, if it isn't, how do you know that this is right for you?
I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that, because this was something that did feel right for me, but for someone that I think has doubts, then that probably won't be right for them. But me, I'm one of those people that if I don't go and do something, I'm gonna beat myself up, because I'm always gonna be thinking about what if. So I have to go try it.
Hmm.
But to that point, I'm not just risk seeking. To some extent, I'm risk averse, but it's calculated risk.
Hmm.
Um, but I think how you really know is if you're just not passionate about working at an organization, and you really just like have a disdain for the system, and you really want to have like autonomy over what you're trying to do. I think that that may be the path.
Hmm.
There are people that really are guided by structure and need structure. And if you're one of those people, this is probably not the field for you, because there is no structure, unfortunately. You have to
Hmm.
design that structure and create uh, those walls for yourself and build the foundation. And that's difficult because there's no roadmap. And I think that that is often can be discouraging for a lot of people. So you have to really have that tunnel vision. So if you don't have the vision to see something from 0 to 1, or can't think bigger picture, then it's probably not for you. Because a lot of people are really much rooted in the day to day, and
Hmm.
don't necessarily can think about things that don't currently exist. And
Hmm.
that was something that I found when I was starting this idea, is that you're going to get more people to tell you why you shouldn't do it versus why you should do it. And so to that point, you have to be cautious on who you share things with as well, because that can be discouraging. And you really have to have this sense of confidence and
Hmm.
belief in what you do, and think that you can bring it to fruition. And
Hmm.
I feel that I personally always had that type of drive and that type of ambition, that if I put my mind to it, I could achieve it.
Hmm.
So I just knew that this was something that was for me. And I think just as a student in school, or just throughout the years, I felt that, I mean, I'm for sure smart and had the academic prowess for sure, but I wasn't driven by a lot of the things that I was learning, and I would always question, like, why am I doing this? And I would do my work for sure, but there were some peers or some of my classmates that if they were told to do an assignment, they're just going to do it, and they're not going to necessarily question, why does this make sense? And I think that there are a lot of people that you'll see, or people that I've met in college, that very much are by the book, by the rules, following what's been done before them. And if those people aren't good entrepreneurs, because I think that they are very much achievement based, and know they're like, oh, if I study real hard, I'll get an A. And if I get an A, then I'm gonna have a high GPA. And then this GPA is gonna lead to this well-paying job. Then I'll be able to go to grad school and do that. Versus it's like, all right, but why do I really want to do that? Does this make me happy? Is this something that I'm passionate about? And more often than not, I'm like, I don't. I don't like that. I rather create my own future, even if that may be unknown to everybody else. I think that is something that's always guided, I would say, me and my partner.
So yeah, I think, and I think you're right. I think that the answer is for each person to figure out. If you don't have this itch that you need to scratch, if you don't have that something prodding you, that
Hmm.
desire to do it,
Right.
then maybe you're not, and maybe you shouldn't.
Hmm.
And I think to your point about structure makes a good point as well. I mean, if you're just, excuse me, if you're just looking to somebody else, to a boss, to a company or whatever, to say, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to succeed. And if you do that, we'll reward you or whatever, then that's not an entrepreneur. That's not somebody that should start their own business. You need to be able to want to figure that out for yourself. You may even want to be, not want a boss. I mean,
Hmm.
that's when I went out on my own 21 years ago. I realized one of the things I learned was I'm a control freak.
Right.
I want to do things my way. I don't want to have to do it somebody else's way. I don't want to
Right.
have to get consensus from somebody else or approval from somebody else. So maybe that's what people should look for within themselves in making a decision as to whether to take this path. And getting to that, I mean, maybe it would help our listeners to hear your path. I mean, how did you start scratching that itch once you discovered it, and how did you come about becoming starting a business and being successful in that area?
Okay, well, two things. I like you made some really good points, and I just want to add to that other answer.
Sure.
I think you have to be cool with failure too. And a lot of that type of person that I just mentioned, the idea of failing is so takes such a toll on them, and they think that like it's the end of the world.
Hmm.
But I'm okay with failing, because failing isn't failing, those are learning opportunities, because then you learn and do better. And so I've always been like that, and I'm like, all right, well, this just didn't work out, but it'll go on. But how I got to that path was, I think it was through my internships in college. And when I was in middle school, I had this idea of I wanted to be an investment banker or a hedge fund manager. And I had internships in these respective fields at really great firms. And I ultimately saw like I like the idea of those jobs because they were high paying, but I'm not really passionate about it. I'm not really passionate about working these long hours to help somebody else's business. That just wasn't the driver for me. So I'm like, I just to be quite frank, I'm like, I'm not going to succeed like that just because I can't. It's not mine. So I always knew that I wanted to do something. And I think for me, it was just growing up around entrepreneurs. So my dad had a men's clothing store, and I always just like admired how he was on his own schedule, whether or not he was the best business owner or manager. I still liked how he had autonomy and control over his business, versus like looking at my mom and like seeing that like, okay, well, she has to be at work at a certain time, she has to do this, she's talking about her colleagues and how she doesn't like that. I'm like, wow, but dad over here, he like gets to do this, and this looks super cool. And this is something that he created. Like, that's awesome. And then even looking at it from the investing or the financial services world, getting to know John Rogers over the years was super cool, because I'm like, oh, this is an entrepreneur as well. He started an asset management firm. So I'm like, that would be super cool to run that. And I'm like this, and again, he has the flexibility, and he gets to dictate how he allocates his time.
Mhm.
Um, and then similar things of working at the hedge fund. I'm like, oh, it was like, oh, the guy who runs the hedge fund, same thing. He started this, he runs
Mhm.
it. So I don't think it was necessarily the industry that I liked. I think it was the people that I saw who were leading these organizations. And that's when like the light bulb clicked off for me, or clicked on for me, I guess after my senior year. I mean, I knew I had to get a job. So I applied for different positions and ultimately worked at a bank for 2.5 years. And I'm like, okay, well, if I have to do it, let me at least be in an industry that I'm passionate about. So had like I was a credit analyst with a specialization in commercial real estate. And that was just kind of vague at the time because I don't really know what it is that I want to do, but I know this is something where I know this is something that's of interest to me. And so
Mhm.
maybe I'll figure it out after 2 years and then go, you know, become a real estate developer or whatever. But what ultimately happened was in July of 2016, after I graduated from school, my high school friend Brian put this like concept in my head, and this concept ultimately ended up becoming the genesis of Rapunzel. And Brian he took a gap year after high school, so he was a rising senior.
Mhm.
So the name of the game for me was to get a job after school. So I already signed my offer letter. So as Brian was in his senior year, I was starting my first year as a credit analyst. So he's working on building the shell and the framework of Rapunzel, and we are coming up with like a pitch deck and figuring out the product market fit for the idea. And it worked at the time because he was still in school and I was just getting started in my career. But I think I was encouraged because I'm like, oh wait, this makes sense. Rapunzel, it basically encompasses everything that I'm about. It's an app that is basically making the stock market accessible for
Mhm.
people. That's something that I can relate to just because I was exposed to it at an early age, so I understand the importance of it. So I really can speak to the benefit of having a platform like this. And the name Rapunzel stems from the fact that people view the world of investing and the returns of Wall Street as something that's perched in an ivory tower. So we're essentially rolling down the hair and providing equitable access to the returns of Wall Street. So this was like something that I was passionate about. And I'm like, oh wait, this is it. And I was felt like I was searching for something after I graduated or searching for something during my senior year. And I just wasn't driven by my job. And I knew that I wasn't going to be there very long. But once the idea came about, I'm like, okay, this is it. So in my head, I'm just started to plot about like what I can do to become full time working Rapunzel, but also how I can maximize my time at the bank and
Mhm.
cultivate relationships and also utilize the full time salary that I'm making to build up a safety net, a savings fund. So in the event that I am leaving, I'll be able to support myself for a period of time. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what happened. So Brian would graduate and he would ultimately work on Rapunzel full time because when he graduated in May of 2017, we were in the process of raising money. So the business, not to say it was mature, it was more mature than it was a year ago. So it had some legs. So we're like, okay, this could work. And so we raised t- roughly $270,000 um, in 2017 to build the app. And so we kind of like were rolling ever since, but that wasn't enough money to jump and join full time because it's like I still have expenses and whatnot. So over between 2017 and 2018, I would basically try to juggle working at the bank and also running or managing a startup, which was the worst because if I'm succeeding in one area, something else is taking the back seat. So it would really be like flip flop with killing it and doing everything I need to do over here at Rapunzel and then slacking off or not necessarily slacking off, but my work at the bank taking a back seat. And so that ultimately would cause rifts later on down the line, but it was it was not in vain. And ultimately was able to position myself by the end of 2018 to take the leap to work on Rapunzel full time,
Mhm.
starting January of 2019. Another event that happened during that time was Rapunzel launched its first high school investment competition. And I think it's important to talk about like what Rapunzel is. So Rapunzel is a simulated investing application that gives users 10,000 fictitious dollars to buy and sell publicly traded companies utilizing real-time market data, in
Mhm.
which users are able to buy and sell publicly traded companies and enter their portfolios into competitions for scholarship and cash competitions for users over the age of 18.
Mhm.
So 2018, after we've got the app built out, we're like, how do we get users? So we essentially partnered with the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago and got Ariel Investments to sponsor a scholarship for high school students in Chicago. And we got over 2,500 kids to participate in that competition. And our grand prize winner actually came from an alternative school on the west side of Chicago, and her name was Destiny. Prior to winning this Rapunzel challenge, she thought that she was going to have to join the military to support her family. And we found out later that she had a really egregious upbringing. So there was just this moment of realization that this competition shifted this young lady's trajectory. And it just felt like this is the universe speaking to me, like her name is Destiny. Like, okay, Rapunzel is what I've got to be doing. So
Mhm.
for me, that was the ultimate like pat on the head, or just like this, go do this, go do this. So I'm like, all right, this is the sign. Like you have to
Mhm.
recognize signs when they present themselves in the universe. I'm a firm believer of that. So that was the ultimate confidence that I needed to like make that leap. I already knew I was coming on full time and like had all intentions of doing it, but I'm like, I was so eager to get out of the bank. But I also recognized that working in corporate America, you get bonuses. So I needed to stay till the end of the year to get that, because I'm like, I'm working very hard on this. I'm not going to leave that money on the table. So I had the conversation with my partner and like, okay, I'm coming on full time in January. This is what we're going to do. This is what I can do right now, but bear with me. But I'm all in on this, 10 toes. Let's rock. And so after leaving the bank and on January 3rd, 2019, that was my last day. I came on board full time in Rapunzel, not making a salary at all. And like I said, I was able to build up a safety net because I knew when I was working, especially after Rapunzel had presented itself as a business, that I was going to want to do that. And I
Mhm.
knew, and just understanding startups, that that might not necessarily come with the salary right out the gate. So I
Mhm.
know I needed to position myself that I could take care of all of my financial obligations in the interim.
Mhm.
And that's what I did. But it was not easy at all. And I essentially exhausted my or depleted my savings during that year in which I left the bank to work Rapunzel full time. But luckily, at the end of 2019, we were able to raise, or we were able to successfully do or raise $3 million for the business,
Mhm.
which would ultimately allow us to um, rebuild the platform or enhance the platform and make it a very robust system, but would also allow us to collect salaries too, which was, I mean, that's crazy. It was a mind-boggling thing for me. I'm like, wow, I'm getting paid to work on something that I built. And I think a lot of folks, or I would say, I think entrepreneurship is too romanticized. And I think people like the idea of owning their own businesses or think that it's just this glamorous thing, but it's really not. It is a grind, and you have to be strong mentally, physically, and just be tough altogether, because expectations, things never go as planned. And while you think something may happen, the carpet will get swept up from under you, and then you have to be able to pivot
Mhm.
and bounce back and keep that same energy. You can't get defeated. And that's why I say you have to be a strong person to do that, and really be passionate without having the not necessarily structure, but having the security there,
Mhm.
because it's not always there. um, and I think that's what jobs provides. Like, you're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks, Here, you don't know. You don't
Right.
even know if this, if like the investor is going to come through. And that was something that we have been talking to a lot of people over 2019. And it's like, yeah, they're going to invest and they didn't. And it's like, oh, you get bummed out, but you got to keep going. So
Mhm.
there's this element of perseverance that you really have to have and being comfortable in that uncertainty. And like I said, be comfortable failing, because it's not failing, you're just, there are lessons to learn. And so you really have to take your failure and use that as like basically weights, or to strengthen yourself.
Mhm. Well, there's nobody there to tell you what to do, and
No.
you don't have a boss. I knew a man when he was working. He had a tape to his monitor. Is a 10-word sentence. Each word was 2 letters. If it is to be, it is up to me,
Hmm.
and it's all up to you. Something that there's no boss. There's nobody else to go to, and that's what makes it so hard. And
Exactly.
that's the dark side of this wonderful image of the entrepreneur, and you're going to go out and make a lot of money and everything else. It's a lot of hard work, and yes, you need to learn to deal with failure and know that you're going to face a lot of it, at least early on. But it's how you learn from that failure, and improve and do better as you go along.
Right.
Uh, so your app Rapunzel, it sounds from your description that it basically sort of mirrors that program you had went through in elementary school, where I mean, you were playing, actually given real money to play with. Here you're using imaginary money, but you're still learning from it, and that sort of enters you into real competitions or abilities to deal with and work with real money. Is that what happens?
So each user gets 10,000 fictional dollars,
Hmm.
and they're able to buy and sell publicly traded companies with real time, utilizing real time market data,
Hmm.
and they're able to enter into competitions and earn real money. So that's the premise of the app. And the idea is that if you utilize the Rapunzel platform, you're ultimately going to want to open up a real brokerage account, because you're going to
Hmm.
see like the power of investing.
Hmm.
So that's something that we're actually working on right now, is developing a partnership with a brokerage platform so we can be graduating our users
Hmm.
into opening or converting them to real accounts.
Hmm. All right. Well, we'll leave some links in the show notes to how people can find out more about these apps. I'm assuming it works on both Android and the iPhone, right? There are versions for both platforms.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, my next question kind of answered itself as far as whether the type of business you start makes a difference. It's really what you're passionate about and what you want to do, right? There's no one right or wrong type of business.
No, no, yeah, I think you have to like what you're doing. I don't think you can just start something because you think like, oh, I'm gonna make a lot of money doing it. Because
Hmm.
as we were just saying, you have to work so hard on this. This is not a 9 to 5. My workday
Hmm.
doesn't end at 5 o'clock. If anything, I'm working. I don't have necessarily weekends either, because it never stops. There's always something to do.
Hmm.
So if you don't like what you're doing, then it's not going to work. It just simply isn't. So I think that whatever that you ultimately decide to do, whatever it's a good or product that you're creating or a service you're providing, it has to resonate internally. It
Hmm.
has to make sense, and it also has to have a product market fit too. You can't just make a business out of something that you like, because if it doesn't make sense in theory, then it's also not going to work. But if there is some personal connection to what
Hmm.
you're doing and there's a passion there, then that's going to carry you far. Because even when you're going to raise money, then the people that are on the other end of the table are going to see that you really eat, breathe, and sleep what you're doing. They can see right through that, because initially, when you're raising capital, people aren't investing in the business, they're investing in the people.
Hmm.
So you have to be able to exhibit the confidence, and you have to be able to demonstrate the wherewithal of what you're doing and what you're trying to raise money for.
Hmm.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So whatever you're passionate about, because that's gives you the most chance of success, I would think.
Hmm.
So let's get to the real issue here for the listeners as well. If someone decides they want to do the side hustle and they want to start building something for themselves, they have that entrepreneurial itch. How should someone position themselves financially before launching the business at that time in their lives so that they know that they'll survive economically?
I think it's pretty simple. Try to save as much money as you can, as
Mm-hmm.
much money as possible. And that'll just, it's rainy day, it creates a safety net for you.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, I would say thinking is cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to pay to think. And I think that there's so many resources out there, especially with the internet, that you can really become an expert in your respective field before you go out and raise a dollar. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's important to do. And I think that maybe it's developing a white paper around the industry and showing that, like, I've done exhaustive research on the space and I know what's going on and I know this thing has value and there's a need for it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's I mean, it really just goes down to what's the problem and what's the solution. So if you can really articulate how your idea is going to solve a problem and speak to why you're doing this, then I think you're already in the right direction. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that'll give you the fuel to keep going as you're like building that safety net of savings
Mm-hmm.
and really starting to interact with other people that could potentially help you out
Mm-hmm.
before you ultimately start to do it full time.
All right. So it sounds like there are two things you need to do to prepare. One is to start that emergency fund, that safety net
Hmm.
of having maybe a year's worth of expenses saved, so that you know you can survive for a while. But also at the same time, while you're saving that money, do your homework. Know
Exactly.
exactly what you need to do. Go through everything, plan the business, set it up. How is it going to make money? What is the mechanism? How much is it going to cost you to run the business? You need to become an expert in that field. Know what you're doing,
Right.
and you have some of the luxury of time because you have a job that's paying you, that's paying the
Right.
bills. And while that's happening, evenings and weekends, it doesn't cost you to think, as you say. So do your homework, save your money, and then once you're finished doing both, then you've positioned yourself to open your business, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Well, that's certainly great advice. And Myles, and thanks for coming on the show. We'll leave, as I said, some links in the show notes to information on your app. If somebody wants to reach out to you, are you on social media? Where are you? How can they contact you?
We are on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Rapunzel Investments. You can find us on Twitter at Rapunzel_invest. And you can find us in the Google Play Store at Rapunzel Investments and iOS App Store at Rapunzel Investments too. And it's important to note it's Rapunzl. So it's like the fairy tale, except there's no E there. And you can find us on the internet at rapunzelinvestments.com as well. And I'm Myles Gage and I'm on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect, add me on there. And I'm always on my computer. So I'm pretty responsive if there are any other questions or anyone's trying to get a hold of me.
Great. Make it easy. We'll be putting all of that information that Myles just stated into the show notes. So you can just go to the show notes and just click through from there. So, Myles, thanks for coming on the show. A lot of great information for folks out there that have that entrepreneurial itch and want to start their own business and have that passion. What they need to do first and what they need to do to have the best chances of succeeding.
Right. And just one last thing that I want to
Sure.
leave on is Rapunzel just launched cash competitions for users over the age of 18. So
Mm-hmm.
we have weekly competitions in which we give away $100, and we have monthly competition in which we're giving away $1,000. So you can also participate in Rapunzel's cash competitions to help build your safety net to ultimately make the leap to get your business off the ground.
There you go. Sounds like a plan. All right, Myles, thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you for having me, Steve.